Right now, federal opposition leader Peter Dutton is going nuclear. He's pushing to end the ridiculous ban on nuclear power in Australia and clear the way for building, we believe, Andrew Clennell was reporting, perhaps 5 or 6 nuclear power plants, putting them exactly where the old coal-fired power plants that are being destroyed are now, so that we don't need to build all these new power lines the Albanese government is planning to build all around the country to hook up wind and solar farms that it wants built from Perth to Sydney and everywhere.
They're proposing rolling out 28,000 kilometres of new poles and wires. Their program is at a cost of $1.2 to $1.5 trillion, all of which is going to be passed on in the form of higher bills to families and businesses who just can't afford it. The latest technology is what we're looking at. So it's zero emissions. It's similar, obviously, to the technology that the government signed up to on the AUKUS submarine deal with the United States and the United Kingdom. It means that we have a chance to reduce electricity prices. It means that we have the ability to have stability in the system, because at the moment there will be disruption. Every analyst points out the fact that the path the government has us on at the moment is not just going to result in higher prices, but more likelihood of blackouts and brownouts.
Now, Treasurer Jim Chalmers was already scoffing about all this before Dutton even spoke today.
His proposal will cost hundreds of billions of dollars, take decades to build.
Billions of dollars, decades to build. That sounds like Chalmers is talking actually about Labor's green scheme that's costing a bomb, is years behind, still years to go before we've got enough power, if that'll ever happen, and right now is leaving us threatened with blackouts. Now, I don't know if nuclear is our cheapest option to fill in this gap in power supply, but it is reliable power. It is zero emissions power if you want to cut emissions. And it works, so why ban it? It just doesn't stack up commercially. If it doesn't, the market will sort that out. There's no need for a ban. And you know what's really happening here. That ban on nuclear is actually irrational. I mean, people like, the Anthony Albanese's of the world, they were all for nuclear bans back when they thought, oh, any kind of nuclear power is going to fry your brains or something. I don't know. The one big fatal accident that ever happened at a nuclear power station was actually 38 years ago in Chernobyl, in an old Russian reactor. Primitive technology. And even then, the known death toll was well under 100 people, not the hundreds of thousands claimed by nuclear hysterics in Labor and wherever. Joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt Canavan, thanks for your time. Can we afford nuclear power when you've got the CSIRO and the government saying, oh, look, it's just too expensive for Australia?
Well, we can't afford not to, Andrew. We can't afford not to get rid of these ridiculous, out-of-date, out-of-step with the rest of the world bans on certain energy types, including nuclear power. I mean, you can't trust anything the CSIRO or the government says because they have already had their promises broken. The government's been in power for almost 2 years. Remember, they told you they would cut your power bills by $275. Remember, the CSIRO has been saying for years that renewables are cheaper. Well, how is that working out? You've got a real-world test now and see, have those guys, have what they said, have what they have actually said come true? Has that come true? And it hasn't. It clearly hasn't, because I'm sure all of your viewers, their power bills have gone up. And so what we've got to do is remove all the bans we have, the ridiculous bans on different types of power. We're going to need all types of power, and I'm not saying we should ban or move away from renewables completely. We just can't rely on an intermittent, unreliable source of power full-time. By definition, you can't rely on it full-time because it doesn't work all the time. We need to have power stations like nuclear, like coal. We have a de jure ban on nuclear power in this country, one of the only countries to ban it in law. That needs to go. But we also need to get rid of the de facto ban on coal as well. Other countries are building these things like they're going out of fashion. Indonesia is taking and stealing our nickel industry right now because it's building coal-fired power stations. And I still want to be a country that makes things. I want to maintain our manufacturing industry. It is going out the back door right now. And we need to get back to building power stations that work, having reliable power to bring down power prices for Australians, and also keeping those people employed in manufacturing in its sector in a job.
Yeah, Indonesia's building more than 20 coal-fired units simply to make cheap nickel that is killing our own nickel industry, while we're, going green and raising our power prices to unbelievable levels. How many nuclear power stations, though, are being built in other countries?
Well, there's now over 20 countries that have signed up to nuclear power. There are more than 50 being built all around the world right now. Look, most of those are being built in our region, in the Asian region. Some are being built in Europe and the US as well, and Canada. But it is a situation we've got where people are being, where countries around the world are taking our manufacturing jobs because we are not investing in these types of power sources. So we have to get back to using our natural resources. We've got the world's largest uranium. Let's not let other countries use it and deny ourselves that same bounty.
Now, I found it ironical that the Labor government saying, well, look, we shouldn't even think of this because it's going to take decades to build. Well, if they'd dropped the ban decades ago, we'd already have one. But this is from a government that's got plans to build and build and build more wind and solar units all the way to 2050. So that's already a long way away. How fast, if we really put our mind to it, could a nuclear power plant be built?
Well, recently the UAE just opened 4 nuclear reactors. They didn't have a nuclear industry beforehand. The first unit they built took 8 years for them to go from the start of construction to it actually being in operation. And after 14 years, they brought 4 online. And so, look, I think that is realistic. Obviously, unfortunately, we're not the UAE and we have issues with building large projects, infamous issues, if you like, in our construction sector. But you'd think something in the order of under a decade we could do this if we put our mind to it. Now, that does take time. But the old Chinese proverb is right. The best time to build a nuclear power station was 20 years ago. The next best time is tomorrow. We've got to get cracking on this stuff. But that's also why I say we shouldn't turn our back on coal-fired power. We can build those a lot quicker. We've got the technology, the know-how, the infrastructure to do that. But we just need to be laser-like focused on delivering lower prices to Australians. I think that's what Australians want. All the polls now indicate that people would much prefer a government that focuses on lowering their prices, lowering their cost of living, and stop trying to genuflect to the green gods overseas that does nothing to help our environment, but just puts up the cost of everything for Australians.